You can say a lot about Barack Obama, but one thing's for sure. He knows how to handle a tough crowd. So when Melania Trump tried to teach him a lesson on stage, Obama didn't argue. He just laughed. And that laugh, it said more than any speech ever could. It was one of those rare evenings when Washington, D.C. seemed to hold its breath. The Grand Hall shimmered under golden lights. Cameras stood ready. The crowd buzzed with quiet whispers, and every seat was filled. Politicians, reporters, advisors. Everyone who mattered was there. The event was meant to be about the people. A discussion on the country's most pressing issues, inflation and the rising cost of living. But even before it began, everyone knew this gathering wouldn't stay calm for long. Because tonight's guest list wasn't ordinary. Sitting in the front row, separated by just one empty seat, were Barack Obama and Melania Trump. Two figures who represented entirely different worlds, one known for his calm intelligence, the other for her poised mystery. The air between them was thick, almost electric. The host walked to the stage, smiling nervously, and adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome our chief guests, the former First Lady, Mrs. Melania Trump, and former President Barack Obama." The audience applauded, though the sound felt cautious, like clapping while holding your breath. Obama gave his familiar warm nod. Melania smiled politely, though her eyes were unreadable. She looked elegant, composed as she always did. But there was a sharpness behind that calm face, something that made you look twice. The host continued, "Tonight, we talk about what matters most to our citizens, the price of living, jobs, and the future of American families." He turned toward Melania. "Mrs. Trump, if you would start us off, please." The lights shifted slightly as she stood. Her heels clicked against the stage floor, a small sound yet somehow commanding. She took her place behind the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked around the hall. For a moment, there was silence. Then she began. Her voice was soft, almost soothing at first. "America has always faced challenges," she said. "But now families struggle more than ever. Prices are high. Parents worry. Children see stress in their homes." People nodded. It sounded thoughtful. But slowly the rhythm of her speech changed. Her tone grew sharper, her expression more serious. She started to talk about how some of these problems began long before today. How certain decisions from the past had created the troubles Americans were now facing. The audience shifted in their seats. A few looked toward Obama, who sat calmly with his hands folded. He didn't blink. Then came the moment that made the air freeze. Melania said, "Sometimes leadership fails not because of poor ideas, but because of poor truth. We must always ask, who led us here and what do we really know about them?" It was subtle, but powerful enough. Everyone knew what she was hinting at. She had touched on an old bitter wound, the one where people once questioned Barack Obama's citizenship. A false rumor, long discredited but still carried by whispers. You could feel the tension thicken. Even the sound of air conditioning seemed louder. Obama didn't react. He simply smiled, the kind of quiet smile that said, "I've seen this before." Melania continued her speech, unaware of the storm she had just stirred. She ended by saying, "True leaders must not hide behind history. They must own it." The applause that followed was polite, but uneasy. Some clapped to be respectful. Others stayed quiet, glancing between Obama and Melania, waiting for what would come next. Melania stepped down from the stage, head held high. As she walked past Obama's seat, their eyes met for a single second. Hers, proud but tense, his calm, unbothered, almost amused. Then the host returned to the microphone. "Thank you, Mrs. Trump," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "Now we invite President Barack Obama to share his thoughts." The room went still. Cameras turned. Obama rose from his seat, straightened his jacket, and began walking toward the stage. Every head turned with him. Every heartbeat seemed to slow, because everyone in that room knew what was about to happen next wasn't just another speech. It was about to become a moment no one would forget. The applause was fading when Melania took her seat again. The crowd shifted, whispering in low tones. They knew she had just said something bold, maybe too bold. But Melania sat tall, expression steady, as if she had done nothing unusual at all. A few minutes later, the host leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Mrs. Trump, for your perspective," he said, his voice tight with politeness. Then he added, "Before we invite President Obama, we'll open a short Q&A for Mrs. Trump." That was the moment she seemed to be waiting for. A man in the audience stood up, holding a notepad. His tone was calm but direct. "Mrs. Trump," he asked, "inflation and the cost of living are top concerns for about 62% of Americans. Who, in your view, holds the most responsibility for this crisis?" The question hung in the air. Cameras zoomed in. Melania took a slow breath, folded her hands, and gave a small smile. "Well," she began, "some people like to act as if these problems appeared overnight. But we all know they started years ago, long before my husband's time in office." A few heads turned toward Obama, who was listening quietly in the front row. Melania continued, her voice firmer now. "I believe mistakes made by past leaders created the foundation for today's challenges. Decisions that were meant to help only made things worse." Her words grew heavier with each sentence, as though she wanted them to land like stones. Then came the twist. She said, "Leadership is about truth. And if truth is uncertain, if there are even questions about someone's beginnings, then how can people trust what came after?" The crowd froze. It wasn't just an argument anymore. It was personal. Everyone knew exactly what she meant. Years ago, her husband had repeated false claims that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. The issue had long been settled, but bringing it up again in this setting was a sharp strike at his character. For a heartbeat, the room felt motionless. Even the host glanced nervously at Obama, who simply sat back, expression calm, hands clasped together. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. He just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides both patience and power. Melania seemed encouraged by the silence. She raised her chin slightly and went on. "When people question the background of a leader, it's not out of hate," she said softly. "It's because truth should never hide. And sometimes we see what others pretend not to." A few people murmured uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact altogether. It was the kind of silence that comes when everyone knows something is wrong, but no one dares to stop it. When she finally ended, her last line echoed through the hall. "True leaders don't just lead with speeches. They lead with honesty about who they are." The applause that followed wasn't the thunder she expected. It was uneven, awkward, half-hearted claps, scattered and uncertain. She smiled anyway, pretending not to notice. Then she walked back to her seat, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. As she passed Obama, she gave him a quick glance. For just a moment, her confidence flickered. He was looking straight at her, calm eyes, a small smile, not angry, not smug, just unreadable. It was as if he already knew how this night would end. The host cleared his throat, trying to bring life back into the room. "Thank you, Mrs. Trump, for sharing your thoughts," he said. "And now, we welcome former President Barack Obama." That sentence changed everything. Obama slowly rose from his seat. The rustle of the audience died instantly. Every lens, every light, every heartbeat in that room turned toward him. He adjusted his jacket and took a slow step toward the podium. Melania kept her gaze forward, but her fingers tapped against the armrest. No one spoke. No one moved, because deep down everyone knew. After the words Melania had just thrown, Obama's reply was going to be something no one would forget. And the hall waited in total silence. The hall was silent. No murmurs, no whispers. Only the faint hum of the air vents. Barack Obama stood slowly, adjusting his jacket with that same calm rhythm he was known for. He didn't rush, and he didn't need to. Every eye was on him. As he walked toward the podium, the wooden floor echoed under his shoes, soft, steady, measured. Some people leaned forward. Others held their breath. Even the cameras seemed to move slower, waiting for what he would say. When he reached the microphone, he gave a small nod to the host, and then looked out at the crowd. A faint smile touched his face. Not forced, not cold. Just the kind that said, "I've been here before." "Thank you," he began, voice deep and even. "It's always good to be back in a room that cares about the future of our country." The audience relaxed slightly, but only a little. The tension was still there, hiding behind every word. Obama started carefully. He spoke about the rising cost of living, the weight families were carrying and the frustration many Americans felt. He acknowledged the worry, the stress, and the sleepless nights. He said people don't want speeches. They want relief. They want fairness. They want leaders who understand what they're going through. His tone was steady, almost comforting, until his eyes drifted toward the first row where Melania sat. He paused for half a second, long enough for everyone to feel it. Then he added, "But to fix problems, we need truth, not finger-pointing. Because blaming the past has never built the future." A soft ripple ran through the crowd. It wasn't applause. It was awareness. He continued, "I heard earlier that honesty begins with where someone comes from. Now, I've been hearing versions of that for a very long time, and every time it tells me more about the person saying it than about me." The audience chuckled quietly. A few people nodded. Melania's lips tightened. Obama smiled again. "The truth is, leadership isn't about where you were born. It's about what kind of home you build for others. And if the foundation of that home is doubt, fear, or blame, then it will fall, no matter who's living in it." This time the room broke into real applause. But Obama wasn't finished. He looked directly at Melania now, his voice still calm but sharper around the edges. "And since we're talking about truth," he said slowly, "maybe I should ask a question too. Just to be clear, Mrs. Trump." He leaned slightly toward the microphone. "Are you sure you're Trump's real wife?" The room gasped. You could feel the shock hit like a wave. A few gasps, a few nervous laughs, but mostly silence. Heavy, frozen silence. Melania's expression went blank for a moment, as if her mind hadn't processed the question yet. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. Obama kept talking, but now his tone was lighter, almost teasing. "You see, sometimes people spend so much time questioning others. They forget to look at what's happening right next to them." The audience shifted again. Some people hid smiles behind their hands. Others just stared, wide-eyed, waiting to see what would happen next. Obama stepped away from the podium, let the laughter settle, and then said quietly, "Truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't knock, yet it walks right in." Then he paused, looked at the host, and said, "Thank you." But as he turned to leave the podium, the host quickly stepped forward. President Obama," he said nervously, "we'd appreciate if you stayed for a short discussion after your remarks." Obama nodded and returned to his seat, right across from Melania. The energy in the room was completely different now. No one looked away. No one dared speak. Melania's face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. Sharp, cold, calculating. It was clear she wasn't going to let that comment go unanswered. And deep down, the audience knew this wasn't over. The real storm was just beginning. For a few seconds, the room was completely still. You could almost hear the clicking of cameras freezing mid-shot. Melania Trump didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. Her eyes were fixed on Barack Obama, who sat calmly, almost too calmly, just a few feet away. Then she stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoed through the hall. Every head turned, her voice came out sharp but trembling beneath the surface. "Mr. Obama," she said, "that question was insulting and disrespectful. You have no right to speak about my marriage in that way." Obama didn't flinch. He looked at her with that same steady expression, cool, patient, almost like a teacher waiting for the class to settle. He said quietly, "I didn't mean to insult. I simply asked a question." "There's a difference." The audience shifted uneasily. You could feel the tension climbing like heat in the air. Melania's tone grew louder. "You think this is funny? You think you can joke about someone's family in public? You talk about truth and leadership, yet you stand here and mock me." Obama leaned slightly forward, hands folded. "Mrs. Trump," he said gently, "truth doesn't mock. It reveals." Her face tightened. "You're twisting words now," she snapped. "You're good with speeches, but not everyone is fooled by charm." That line caught the crowd's attention. Some gasped. Others watched with wide eyes. Obama's smile faded just a little. "You say I twist words," he said. "But when I ask for a simple answer, you dance around it. That usually means someone is hiding something." Melania's breathing quickened. "I am not hiding anything," she shouted, the calmness she started with now completely gone. Obama stayed seated, still composed. His next words dropped like quiet thunder. "Then why does your reaction sound like guilt?" The audience froze again. Melania's face flushed red. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. You don't know what you're talking about. Obama stood slowly now, towering slightly over the podium, his presence filling the stage. Mrs. Trump, he said in a firm tone, I've spent years listening to people question my integrity, my birthplace, even my faith. I didn't lash out. I answered with facts. But if we're talking about truth, maybe I should share a few facts of my own. Her eyes widened. What are you implying? Obama tilted his head. Let's just say I've seen documents that might explain why certain people have unusual influence inside the White House. Maybe you should tell your husband to be careful before I decide to make those papers public. The entire hall gasped. Cameras clicked in a frenzy. Melania looked stunned, as if the floor had just dropped beneath her feet. You wouldn't dare, she said in a low voice. Obama raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't I? A tense silence filled the room. Every pair of eyes jumped between them, the calm, composed Obama and the visibly shaken Melania. He continued, softer now, but with weight in every syllable. Respect starts at home. If someone can't treat their own family with dignity, how can they expect to lead a nation with it? Melania tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of water on the table. Obama looked at her one last time and said, Maybe ask your husband why he once said he'd date his own daughter if he could. That's not leadership. That's a warning sign. Gasps filled the air again. A few people covered their mouths in disbelief. Melania froze mid-sip. The color drained from her face. She placed the glass down carefully as if afraid it might break. Obama straightened his jacket and gave a small nod to the audience. I think we've said enough for tonight, he said calmly. And with that, he turned and walked off the stage. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Some stood up instinctively, others just stared. Melania remained seated, motionless. The once confident First Lady now looked small under the harsh lights. Eyes glassy, voice gone. As Obama's figure disappeared through the stage door, the room slowly filled with whispers, confused, amazed, stunned. One thing was clear. This wasn't just a heated exchange. It was the kind of moment that would echo long after the lights went out. The moment Obama left the stage, the room felt different, heavier, quieter, almost hollow. The lights still shone bright, but something had dimmed in the atmosphere. Melania Trump sat there unmoving. Her hands clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white. The once confident, polished First Lady now looked as though the ground beneath her had vanished. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but she didn't look at any of them. She just stared at the glass of water sitting in front of her, as if it held answers she couldn't find. The host, caught between shock and duty, hesitated before speaking into the microphone. Thank you. Mrs. Trump, President Obama, he said awkwardly. We appreciate your honesty tonight. It was clear no one in that hall was ready to move on. The crowd didn't know whether to clap, to stay silent, or to leave. Everyone just sat in a kind of stunned disbelief. Slowly, Melania picked up the microphone again. Her voice trembled at first, barely audible. I think what just happened was very uncalled for, she said, forcing a tight smile. I was here to talk about the nation's issues, not my family. But her voice cracked midway. The strength she tried to summon just wasn't there. A small cough followed, then a pause. She took another sip of water, this time her hands shaking slightly. In that moment, it wasn't the polished image people saw on magazine covers. It was something raw, maybe even fear. She looked toward the exit where Obama had disappeared. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something more, but no sound came out. Then she placed the microphone down quietly and sat back. The event wrapped up in uncomfortable silence. People began to leave in small groups, whispering to one another. Some looked shocked, others impressed, but all agreed on one thing. They had just witnessed something historic. Outside, the night air was cool. Barack Obama walked to his car surrounded by a few staff members, still calm, still collected. One aide leaned in and said softly, "That was quite a moment back there, sir." Obama gave a faint smile. "Sometimes truth needs a push," he replied, opening the car door. As the car pulled away, he looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked thoughtful, maybe even a little sad. Because he knew something. Public confrontations weren't victories. They were reminders of what leadership really meant. Later that night, the clip of the exchange spread everywhere. But Obama didn't comment, didn't respond to anyone's questions. He stayed silent, as if letting the moment speak for itself. And maybe that silence was louder than any speech. A few days later, at another community event, someone in the audience asked Obama, "Sir, do you regret what you said that night?" He paused, smiled slightly, and answered, "No, because truth doesn't regret being told, but people regret not listening sooner." The crowd nodded quietly. Understanding the weight behind the words, he continued, "What I've learned is this. Leadership isn't about winning arguments or embarrassing others. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." Then, looking directly at the audience, he added, "We can't fix our country by throwing stones at each other. We fix it by asking better questions, and by answering them honestly." There was no applause this time, just deep silence, the kind that comes when something true has been said. As he walked off stage, someone whispered, "He still knows how to own a moment." But that wasn't it. Obama didn't own the moment. The truth did. And somewhere, far from the spotlight, Melania sat alone in her private quarters, replaying that night in her mind. The look on Obama's face, the question that cut through her pride, the silence that followed, it all echoed. She had tried to teach him a lesson, but in the end, she was the one who walked away with it. Obama's words still hung in the air, a quiet reminder to everyone who heard them. Truth doesn't shout. It just waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't knock, it walks right in.